may be seated. Give me more witnesses.
No, Dr. Morris, yes.
All right. Bob,
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Please state your name.
we swear him in.
Oh, that might help.
So you want to stand and raise your right hand. You solemnly swear, affirm, tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Please be seated.
Please state your name.
Carl Sender.
What's your business or occupation, sir?
The business is Sender and Company. We're financial advisors to public sector entities.
And what's your educational background, please?
I have a 4-year degree with a Bachelor of Arts in Accounting from Goshen College.
And how long have you been in the financial advisor business in Lake County, Indiana?
I guess it's been over 20 years now.
And how many people are in your firm?
Total, including myself, there are 8.
Have you become employed by the East Chicago Common Council to serve as a financial advisor?
I have.
And do you recall when you first came on board?
I believe it was in the either summer of 2011.
And have you continued, and are you still currently serving as a financial advisor to the Common Council?
I am.
Judge, if I may, I have got a number of exhibits that are listed in the pretrial order that Mr. Schmall and I have exchanged. And
Are there any objections to them?
no, sir.
Okay.
Judge, for the record, Exhibit A is a one-page 2011-2012 budget comparison. B is a 2012-2013 budget comparison with a notation of revision of 9/12/12. C is a one-page 2012-2013 budget comparison with handwritten notes. D is a one-page document from Hobart City Court. Exhibit E is a two-page printout from the state on a number of cases disposed of by various courts in Lake County. F is a 7-page document of state stats on state funding in Lake County courts for 2009 with expenditures for personal services and a number of civil and criminal cases disposed of in 2009. Exhibit G is the same stats except for 2010. Exhibit 8 is 7 pages of the state stats for 2011 for the same. And the last document, Judge, is Exhibit I, which is the Cinder report that's already been mentioned and discussed, Judge, extensively, if I may approach.
Your Honor, the only objection I would have is to, I have no objection to A through H. I believe will be cumulative of Mr. Sender's testimony. I don't have any objection to the line comparisons that he makes, but the other parts of it, other than the figures themselves, would be cumulative of his testimony, and for that reason I object. He's testifying, he can testify to what he wants to testify to, and based upon the figures, but the report itself, I believe, is cumulative of his testimony, and will be cumulative of his testimony.
Bauer?
Judge, it's necessary in order to make it complete. He's already, Mr. Small's already put on an expert witness that made specific reference to the report. When the court considers it, the court may want to see actually what's in the report and the attached exhibit.
Objection overruled.
Mr. Cinder, you came on board, if I recall correctly, during the summer of 2011.
Yes.
Do you recall the budget process that occurred in 2011? And I would, if you got a copy of your 2011-2012 comparison?
I don't believe I do.
If I may approach, Judge.
Yes.
May I stand here, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Cinder, is that a comparison of the budget that you made for the council?
I believe this is a comparison that the city controller's office or city administration provided, and I was given a copy of this.
Do you have any recollection of the various finance committee meetings and workshops that took place in 2011, with any mentioning being made during those workshops or committee meetings about the judge's budget?
Judge, it calls for hearsay unless the judge was present, Your Honor.
He's asking for what your conversations or what people said.
I'm asking if there was any discussion concerning the judge's budget in the fall of 2011 for 2012.
You can get into what people said.
Judge, Mr. Small put in a huge amount of what Mayor Copeland said from time to time. And I would think that the court's capable of sorting out what is credible or what is not credible.
Oh, I mean, the fact that there were discussions about it is one thing. What each individual said is something else.
Judge, I'm not really going there.
All right. There were discussions.
Mr. Cinder, was there in fact discussions about the judge's budget?
I believe there were.
And at that particular time, in 2011, was anything particular done by the council with regard to the judge's budget for 2012?
Other than to kind of review the line items in the budget, my recollection, there were no reductions suggested at that time.
Let me hand you what's already been admitted in evidence as Defendant's Exhibit B. Did there come a time in the fall of 2012 in which budget meetings took place?
Yes.
And at those budget meetings, was a decision made by the Common Council to reduce the judge's budget?
There was, and I believe there was a reduction made.
And what was the amount of that reduction?
As I recall, it was $83,000.
Were there any comments or discussion that took place, at those committee meetings about a comparison of the Chicago City Court with Cherville and Maryville?
Objection, now we're getting into what the discussion is concerned.
I mean, if he made comparisons, that would be visible.
Did you? I don't believe. Did you make any comparisons at that time?
No, we did not.
There were discussions, though, but we can't go into exactly what they were.
Yes, there were.
Directing your attention to the budget process in 2012. Over the previous couple of years, had there been a substantial reduction in the amount of the East Chicago general budget amount?
There have been.
Was there action taken by the council to attempt to reduce the reliance upon gaming funds to support operating costs?
Yes, there were.
Can you explain, do you recall what the figures, generally what the figures were? I mean, how bad was the reliance in previous years?
I believe in 2010 it was at least $8 million, and again for 2011 they were relying on $8 million. For 2012 it dropped down to $6 million, and for 2013 the plan is to spend or to rely on no more than $3 million, hopefully less.
Now, in the fall of 2012, were there a number of financial challenges to the East Chicago Common Council with regard to available funds to meet their budget?
Yes, there were.
Would you please summarize those for the judge?
Yes, it even starts back even earlier than that. As many of you recall, our General Assembly enacted property tax caps, first beginning in 2009. Those caps for residential were 1.5%, for commercial, for multifamily 2.5%, and 3.5% for commercial and all other taxpayers. Those caps then went down to 1% for residential, 2% for multifamily and certain agricultural properties, and 3% for all other property owners. In short, what the property tax caps do is they allow taxpayers to pay a lesser amount up to those percentages, and the local units of government from county, schools, townships, cities, and other special taxing districts receive that lesser amount of money from what they were accustomed to receiving.
And did those limits in fact kick in East Chicago and cause a reduction in the available tax monies?
Yes, they did.
Were there any other financial matters going on that affected the available funds to the city?
I believe there were. I think when I first came on, the city wasn't able to balance its budget. Meaning it was spending more than it had revenue coming in.
Was there also a tax freeze in existence in Lake County because of the failure of the Common Council or the County Council to adopt the gross income tax?
Yes, there was.
And in the past there had been a 3 or 4% automatic raise in all of the budgets throughout the state of Indiana that got frozen.
That's correct.
All right. And was that one of the matters that was considered by the council in approving the budget?
Yes.
Now it calls for hearsay again, that this is what the council considered in arriving at the budget.
What was the question again, Mr. Meyer?
It was whether or not that particular factor was considered by the council in deciding their budget.
He was present.
Were you present?
Yes.
Was there any type of issue about pending litigation with Ameristar concerning their tax assessment?
I believe there was discussions with the city administration about the ongoing litigation on their property taxes.
And is it not true that there was, we're talking about $1 million of adjustment if Ameristar would win?
Yes, I believe it was substantial.
And in fact, recently that litigation's been resolved.
It's my understanding it has been.
And the city will have to be paying back some tax monies to Ameristar as a result of the settlement.
Objection, pleading.
Will the city be required to reimburse Ameristar pursuant to the settlement?
I believe, while I have not seen the settlement, I believe that it will call for a repayment by all taxing units, including the city.
Mr. Cinder, is there anything else that comes to mind that was a financial consideration in the fall of 2012?
Well, just looking, as I recall, looking back to when we had those discussions at council meetings and committee meetings, I recall the outcome was almost $5 million, I think about $4.8 million of budget cuts that were being proposed then, going in from 12 to 13. And they were spread throughout many of the city's departments, affecting just about every department in the city.
Prior to 2012, had there been any attempt by the Common Council to reduce the court's budget?
From when I started working for the council in summer of 11, I don't believe there had been.
And was there a decision made by the council in the fall of 2012 to reduce the court's budget?
Yes, there was.
After the judge filed her mandamus action, did the Common Council direct you to do a comparison of the operations of the Chicago City Court with Cherville, Maryville, and Hobart?
Yes, they did.
And pursuant to that, did you prepare Defendant's Exhibit I?
Yes, we have.
That's quite a document, and it has a lot of attached exhibits. Is that correct?
Yes, it does.
Is the main body of your results contained as Exhibit A on pages 2 through 6?
Yes.
Mr. Cinder, if you would, do you have a copy of that with you?
Yes, I do.
I would like to direct your attention to page number 2. That's got Exhibit A at the top right-hand corner. Let me ask you, where did you obtain the information that's summarized on that page?
This information came from the Indiana Trial Court's statistic reports.
All right. Mr. Cinder, in doing this report, did there come a time in which you looked at records in the Comptroller's office and tried to compare some of the figures with what were online through the state's quarterly case status reports?
Yes.
Were there some differences?
Yes, there are differences. In fact, the latter exhibits of our report are financial information that came from the Comptroller's office.
In my view, the differences were not substantial. To an accountant's view, they probably were because they don't come out to the penny. I'll ask you, were the differences substantial?
I guess it depends on your interpretation of what should be included into the report. If we're just looking at the court's department's budget, the numbers are probably not materially off. I mean, not substantially off, but it's my understanding there are other departments that had staff that were working with the court.
Mr. Cinder, in providing financial assistance to the Common Council in East Chicago, were there a number of times in which the council and you became aware that a number of people were being paid on a classification in one department, but in truth and fact working in another department?
Yes.
Were there, over a period of 2 years, 2 separate ordinances prepared and passed by the council trying to clarify and stop that?
I believe there were.
And you were trying to get the people that work for the court to be paid by the court?
Objection, Your Honor. The best evidence of the ordinance what's contained in the ordinance is the ordinance itself, not the witness's interpretation of what the ordinance means or what the ordinance tried to accomplish.
Well,
I think he's entitled to outline the reason why, there were changes made. I would say Judge Morris has already testified that when she took over, she had people that were working in the courts that were being paid out of, I believe, human resources, and then the efforts were made to try to get all those people just into the court's budget. This has been an ongoing process in Chicago, and it just explains a little bit.
all right.
Again, Your Honor, the best evidence of what the ordinance is the ordinance itself. It states what it states, not what the witness says it states, or the reason for it.
Well, the ordinance states what it states, but you're saying people were paid from somewhere else, or
Yes.
there's evidence in that? I guess you could
Judge-
testify to that.
Judge, let me explain that. Mr. Cinder, in the prior years, who was the financial advisor to the mayor that worked primarily on the budgets and the transfers at the end of the year?
Jim Bennett?
Mr. Cinder, I would like to direct your attention to page 2 of Exhibit A of your report. And in particular, I would like to direct your attention to the bottom of page 2, in which it talks about cases disposed. And you have identified Exhibit D. Now, is that Exhibit D to your report?
Bottom page, I think that's Exhibit A.
Well, but it says cases disposed.
Oh,
in parentheses,
yes, yes.
Exhibit D.
I apologize, yes, that is Exhibit D to the report.
So that's the hard document in order to, this is a summary then of what's in Exhibit D.
That is correct.
Mr. Cinder.
Is that Exhibit D to Exhibit I?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Cinder, to try to make this a little simpler, when you compare the number of cases disposed by the East Chicago City Court for the years 2009, 2010, and 2011 with Hobart, Maryville, and Cherville, were they substantially less than the other three cities?
They were.
And the actual number of less is contained at the bottom of page 2 of Exhibit A.
It shows the number of cases disposed by each of the courts.
It appears that in East Chicago, in those 3 years period, there was not more than 3,800 cases disposed of.
That's correct.
While in Maryville, in those same 3-year period, you were over 11. It was over 11,000 twice and over 13,000 one time.
That's correct.
In Hobart, in the year 2009, these documents show that over 5,700 cases were decided, as opposed to 3,700 cases in East Chicago. That's almost 2,000 cases different.
That's correct.
Would you turn over and go to the bottom of page 3? I see there's an item there that says revenues generated by courts for state funds. Are there 3 separate categories: state funds, county funds, and city-town funds?
That's correct.
in the middle of the next page, on page 4, there are line items in there, revenues generated by courts for local funds.
Yes.
Would you give an explanation of what the comparison was for 2009 between Maryville and East Chicago?
Yeah, for 2009, East Chicago had almost $142,000 of revenues for local funds, while as the town of Maryville Town Court had $536,500.
And for the same year, what did Cherville have?
$355,000.
And Hobart was only at $170,000?
That's correct.
What about for the year 2010?
East Chicago had just a little over $138,000. Hobart had $147,000. And Maryville just under $500,000. And Cherville not quite $299,000.
Mr. Sender, in doing your analysis and comparison, why did you choose Hobart, Maryville, and Cherville?
Because these communities had similar populations.
And they're also in Lake County.
That is correct.
Mr. Sender, in doing your analysis, you never looked, did you, at what the pay rate was for any of the court's employees?
No, we did not.
Were you simply trying to compare the amount of business and cases disposed of and the cost to run the court?
That's correct.
Let me direct your attention then now to 2009 expenditures. Does that appear at the bottom of page 4 of your Exhibit A?
Yes, it does.
In 2009, you have a category called personal salaries. Where did that information come from, if you recall?
I believe this again came from hold on one second. Came from the reports that were filed with the Indiana trial courts.
For the record, I need to ask you, the personal salaries shown by East Chicago on those state reports for 2009 was what, and what comparison was there to Hobart, Maryville, and Cherville?
For East Chicago for 2009, it was $651,777. For Hobart, $270,558. For Maryville, $291,526. And for Cherville, $307,470.
Is it accurate to say that the personal services for the East Chicago court in 2009 is literally at least twice as much as those other courts?
Yes.
Turning the page to page 5, we've got a comparison for 2010. Would you please provide us with that information?
For personal salaries, for East Chicago, $553,335. For Hobart, $275,593. For Maryville, $350,318. And for Cherville, $262,939.
So on these statistics, in 2010, East Chicago personal salaries were over $200,000 above Maryville, and Maryville was higher than the other two.
That is correct.
Is there a similar result on your record, on your filing for 2011?
Yes.
Now, after you did all of that and you looked at this information, Did you attempt to do a calculation and compare the cost either per capita or per case comparison among the 4 cities and towns?
We did for both categories.
Prior to asking what you found in your examination, did you become aware that for Hobart and Merrillville, there were reports that they had 6 staff members that were classified as clerks?
I'm not sure I recall that for Hobart. You're saying clerks for the court?
Yes.
I believe that's right.
In your examination of the East Chicago situation, were any individuals listed as clerks?
I recall there was a listing, we had the payroll listing from the courts and the clerk's department. I don't recall specifically what the titles were right now for the courts department.
In your report, you, in one of your footnotes, you indicated that there were no clerks shown in the court's expenditures because they were part of the clerk's expenditure.
I do know that we did make an adjustment because a number of the clerk's employees were assumed to have been working for the court.
Okay. Did you do an analysis, comparison of the per cost case among these 4 without an adjustment for the expenses of having a clerk?
We did.
And would you kindly explain that to the court, what it came out to?
We used the 2011 expenditures and what the case filings were, and the expense per case for East Chicago was $209. For Hobart was $69. For Merrillville, $27, and for Cherville, $77.
So it's accurate to say, is it not accurate to say that the cost per case, without any adjustment for the expenses of clerks, is 2.5 times the highest other neighbor?
I believe it is. I believe that's correct.
In your filing that's resumed on page 6 in Exhibit A, you have got some footnotes talking about the clerk.
That's correct.
Would you please explain to Judge Paris what happens if you roll the cost of the clerks into consideration of the overall cost per case of the Chicago City Court?
Okay. We add in 9 full-time clerks that we believe are working or doing court-related activities. The costs then increase on a per-case basis to $321.
Mr. Cinder, let's shift gears. There came a time, I believe, that you were asked to look at other funds being handled or monitored by the Chicago City Court. In particular, were you asked to look at adult probation?
That's correct.
And what did you find in that particular fund?
In that particular fund, there exists cash on hand of approximately $165,000 at the end of June 2013.
And
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that because there's no disclosure about his testimony. There's no disclosure. When I asked what was going to be discussed by way of expert testimony to support the council's position, there's been no mention in Mr. Sender's report that I'm aware of that mentions the use of the probation fund. So it's not been disclosed.
Is he going to testify as to use of the funds or as to the funds are there?
Well, Judge, I was going to go to the use of the funds also.
Is he qualified to testify as to the use of those funds?
Judge, let me establish a basis.
Just show an objection, Your Honor, that there's been no expert disclosure about Mr. Sender testifying, offering expert testimony about the funds or the use of the funds.
Let's
And
see
I
if
object
he-
for that reason.
Well, let's start getting into it. You can object if he goes on, if he's not qualified to give an
Mr.
opinion.
Sender, have you been a financial advisor to a number of governmental entities in Northwest Indiana?
Yes.
And have you in fact been hired by Lake County to do some financial analysis work?
Objection, Your Honor. This is leading on this qualification. I think the witness ought to be telling his qualifications to the court as opposed to Mr. Donald. I object on the grounds that it's leading.
Well, I think we need to get into whether he knows anything about probation funds and how they're used and how they can be used.
Do you know anything about adult probation funds and how they can be used?
I'm going to object, Your Honor. It calls for a legal conclusion. The witness is not a lawyer.
The answer is either yes or no.
I'm going to overrule. You can answer.
Yes.
And why do you know, how is it that you know about that?
Through several sources. One, through the State Board of Accounts accounting manual on city courts. There's a section in there, and also through a conversation I had with Mr. Charlie Pry of the State Board of Accounts.
I'm going to object, Your Honor, to the witness testifying.
Sustained.
Do not testify as to what Charlie Price said. All right. But have you had an opportunity to review, and did in fact you review State Board of Accounts guidelines concerning adult probation funds?
I have.
And can those funds, in your opinion, be used to pay for probation services?
Objection, Your Honor. The best evidence of what the State Board of Accounts says is the State Board of Accounts publication regarding city and town courts. And again, this calls for a legal conclusion on the witness about proper use of funds. He's not a lawyer.
Well, the guidelines say it, and that's what he read. I'll allow him to answer based on what the guidelines said, not what his opinion is.
All right, Judge, we've got a copy of the guidelines, or Mr. Sender, let me direct your attention to the State Board of Accounts manual 4-17 and ask you if there is a couple of paragraphs in there that talk about the adult probation fund.
There are.
Is there a particular paragraph that deals with the issue of use of those funds?
There are several.
Is there one that's particularly applicable in this situation as to a question or an issue about use of the adult probation funds for payment of probation salaries?
Your Honor, I object now. It's calling for a legal conclusion about what the State Board of Accounts is saying. The best evidence of what the State Board of Accounts says is the document itself, not the witness's interpretation of it.
What does the document say?
Mr. Sender, do you have a copy of the document?
I do. sorry.
It is.
Mr. Cinder, I'll hand you what's been identified as Defendant's Exhibit J and ask you what that document is.
This is a document from the State Board of Accounts Accounting and Uniform Compliance Guidelines Manual for City and Town Courts.
And is that manual the one that's in effect at this time?
I believe it is.
We would offer into evidence, Your Honor, Defendant's Exhibit J.
Any objections, Mr. Bauer? I mean, Mr. Small?
No, sir.
Exhibit J admitted.
Mr. Cinder, would you please read the two center paragraphs of Defendant's Exhibit J?
The Probation Department
Your Honor, I
or...
object. The best evidence is the document itself. The court's got it in front of him, and Your Honor has it in front of you, and there's no need for the witness to read it and interpret it.
Or what's going to happen to interpret it, Judge?
Is that what he used for his report?
Yes.
Then I could read it.
All right.
I want to make one statement, Your Honor, for the record, that this is not in his report. This is something that has not been disclosed previously, and that's why I objected.
Well, where else are you going with this?
Judge, that's all that I'm going with this line of questioning.
Okay.
Yes.
Judge, that's all that I have.
Cross-examination?
Yes, sir. Mr. Sender, you indicated that you were the financial consultant to the East Chicago Common Council. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How much did the Common Council of East Chicago pay Sender and Company for the calendar year 2011?
I don't recall that, since it was a partial year that we came on, so I don't have those numbers in front of me.
What did the Common Council pay you, Sender and Company, for the calendar year 2012?
I'm guessing probably somewhere around $30,000.
Now, the city itself has its own financial advisor, Mr. Bennett, is that correct?
That is correct.
At the end of 2012, when the budget was being discussed, how much money was there in the gaming revenue fund?
I don't recall how much was in the fund itself.
Approximately.
Well, they get annual appropriations, I believe, were around $22 million.
And the council appropriated through the mayor some of the money in the special gaming fund and transferred that revenue from the special gaming fund to the general fund of the city of East Chicago for the 2013 budget. Is that correct, sir?
They have earmarked or, yes, appropriated some of that money to be transferred to the city's general fund.
Just so we're clear, your report, which is Exhibit I, that was not something that the council had available to it at the time of the budget negotiations or budget discussions in the fall of 2012. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
So this is all after the fact that you did this analysis?
Yes.
When you did the analysis, sir, when you came on in 2011, did you realize that the budget for 2011 of the city of East Chicago was greater than the budget combined of Hobart, Merrillville, and Sherrillville?
I don't recall. I don't have those numbers in front of me.
Do you have an adding machine with you, sir?
Not on me, no.
If I submitted to you that the 2011 budget for the city of East Chicago was $32,600,000, that's the certified budget, would you have any reason to argue with me about that?
For which year are you talking about?
2011.
That sounds about right.
And if I suggested to you that the certified budget for the city of Hobart for that year was $16,232,981, would you have any reason to argue with me about that?
Yeah, I don't. If that's what you said the numbers are, no.
And then for Merrillville and Sherrillville, they were $7,705,000 for Merrillville and $7,612,000 for Sherrillville. That sound about right?
Yeah, I don't know. Haven't seen their numbers.
Now, when the council or its attorney asked you to do this comparison of the East Chicago City Court to the City Court of Hobart and the town courts of Merrillville and Sherrillville, did they also ask you to make any comparison of the expenditures for the executive branch of government of those three towns compared to East Chicago?
They did not.
Likewise, did they ask you to make a comparison of the legislative branch of the East Chicago city government to the legislative branches of the city of Hobart and the towns of Merrillville and Sherrillville?
They did not.
Do you know for a fact that the East Chicago City Council has more members than do the town councils of Merrillville and Sherrillville and the city council of Hobart?
I believe they do.
And what effect did the number of town council people, what effect did the number of city councilmen on the East Chicago City Council have on the overall budget? Make a computation of that?
Well, I believe their total budget for the council, which includes its advisors, is around $560,000 in 2013.
What's the council's portion of the budget for Hobart, Merrillville, and Sherrillville?
Don't know.
In your analysis, sir, did you make a comparison of the salaries of the East Chicago City Court to the total budget of the city of East Chicago. That is, what percentage of the salary, what percentage of the total budget was used for the salaries portion of the East Chicago City Court budget.
We did not. We didn't think it was relevant.
Could you do a comparison of the portion of the budgets of the other two towns in the city, that's Maryville, Sherrillville, and Hobart, what percentage the court budget compared to the total budget for those towns?
We did not.
Did you do a comparison of what you say is the budget of the East Chicago City Court, taking into consideration the figures that you obtained from the Controller's Office regarding monies that weren't reflected in the official report to the court, plus your salaries for the members of the clerk staff?
We did.
Right. Did you take into consideration? Did you do a comparison of what that budget, for the figures that you say the budget actually is, compared to the 2013 budget of the city of East Chicago?
We did not.
Did you actually go to the court in East Chicago and view its operation?
We did not.
Did you actually go to the clerk's office in East Chicago to view its operation?
We did not.
Did you go to any of the courts, that is, Hobart, Maryville, or Sherrillville, to review the operation of those courts?
We did not.
If you go to the Exhibit C to your report, sir, if I could approach a witness, I can show him what I referred to, so we're all on the same page.
Yes.
Exhibit C, sir, is a comparison of the filings in each of the four courts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
it appears that there are a significantly greater number of filings overall in Hobart, Maryville, and Sherrville. Would you agree, sir?
Yes.
Are you referring to Exhibit E?
I'm
I
sorry.
think I got it.
It would be,
Cases disposed, criminal?
no,
I believe, Your Honor, I believe he said Exhibit C.
Yeah. This exhibit?
Yeah, that's new filings.
it's in I, Your Honor.
It's in, it's in his exhibit, see it, I can, okay. That's how you, I got that.
Did you make any comparison, sir, of the commercial establishments, the number of commercial establishments, and the number of patrons in those establishments between East Chicago, Hobart, Sherrville, and Maryville?
We did not.
And you and I would agree that the city of East Chicago has nowhere near the retail establishments that are contained in the other three municipalities, correct?
Yeah, that's generally speaking, yes.
Did you make any comparison of the economic condition of the citizens of East Chicago versus Maryville and Sherrville as far as the economic status of the citizens of those communities?
We did not.
Did you make any traffic count for the number of cars that are using the streets of East Chicago versus cars using the streets of Hobart, Maryville, and Sherrville?
We did not.
Did you make any comparison of the number of probation personnel that are employed by the city of East Chicago City Court versus Maryville Town Court, Sherrville Town Court, and Hobart City Court?
We did not.
Did you make any comparison, sir, of the salary ordinance 12006 and 12029, which contain the slotted positions of East Chicago employees and the base salary for those employees versus the actual employees of the East Chicago City Court and their base and their actual salary?
I'm not sure. I don't have those ordinances, so I don't know what you're talking about right now.
All right. Let me show you what's been marked for identification purposes and received into evidence is Exhibit 8 and Exhibit 9. Have you seen those exhibits before, sir?
I have.
And am I correct in understanding that each of those exhibits, that is 8 and 9, contain slotted positions for various departments within the city of East Chicago?
That's correct.
And they also include the slotted positions for the East Chicago City Court, is that correct?
Yes.
Have you made a comparison to determine whether the employees who are actually employed by the East Chicago City Court match the slotted number of employees as contained in Ordinance 12006 and 12029?
We did not.
Have you made a comparison, sir, of the wage in those ordinances to what the wage of the employees of the city court are actually paid?
We did not.
You're aware of the fact that the city of East Chicago has a longevity pay, is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Have you made any determination as to the amount of the court salary budget attributable to longevity pay that's because of the tenure of its employees?
We did not.
When you made your comparison of the city of East Chicago, the city of Hobart, and the towns of Merrillville and Sherrville, did you consult the Department of Local Government Finance report on expenditures per capita for each of those 4 municipalities?
Not that particular report, no.
You're aware of the fact that local government finance publishes comparisons on the per capita budget expenditure of each city and town in Indiana, is that correct?
Yes.
As you sit here today, do you know where the city of East Chicago ranked for the calendar year 2012 for non-enterprise expenditures per capita, where it ranked among the cities and towns in Indiana?
I've not seen the report.
Did you see the report in 2011?
No.
Did anybody on the council ever ask you, Mr. Sender, we've got this budget, and where are we on a per capita spending basis compared to the towns of Sherrville and Merrillville and the city of Hobart?
Objection, Judge. He made a big deal about me calling for hearsay. Now he's asking the same thing.
Did you ask him what the figures compare to, or?
No, he's asking if anyone asked.
Well, let me. That's really my objection, not his, Your Honor. At the request of the City Council of East Chicago, have you ever made a non-enterprise expenditure per capita comparison between the city of East Chicago and the towns of Merrillville and Sherrville and the city of Hobart for 2011 or 2012.
We made some comparisons. It may not have been on expenditures. I know it was on property tax levies for various Lake County communities and tax rates in comparison to East Chicago.
I'm asking you specifically, sir, about non-enterprise expenditure.
That I don't recall if we was included.
I believe that's all the questions I have.
Bauer, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
I have a couple of questions. Did you take into consideration the types of cases that are heard versus Maryville, Hobart, in Cherville?
We did
Time
not.
involved in the type of case?
No, Your Honor.
Would counsel approach?